You think parking in your neighborhood is bad? Well, try finding a parking space in Koreatown. With 40,000 people jammed into every square mile, the parking shortage in that neighborhood may be the worst in all of Los Angeles. And for one couple, the lack of curb space has led to hours of waiting every week just to secure a spot.
This particular morning, it's Thursday street sweeping from 8 to 10. You have to move your car by 8 or you get a ticket. We usually just get food and then we just sit in front of the parking spot that we find for 2 hours until we can leave the car and not get a ticket. If you don't get parking in the morning, you basically aren't gonna find a spot like within range of your house.
Even though this like sucks to do, it's like way more convenient than like that, I guess. Any jobs we apply for, we have to like put that we can't work on these mornings because we have to do this every week.
We did it! Success.
That was such a long 2 hours.
Yeah. So yeah, we were just out here for 2 hours and the parking enforcement didn't even come, but
or street cleaning.
We got the spot, so that's cool.
LA Times reporter Marisa Gerber wrote about the issue and joins us now to talk about the parking wars in Koreatown. 2 hours? You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
And that's happening all over Koreatown. 40,000 people in every square mile?
Right. Yeah, a lot of people jam-packed in there.
And there's beautiful buildings, all those old Art Deco buildings in Koreatown. One of the problems is those old Art Deco buildings in Koreatown, because when they were built, it wasn't required that there's a parking spot for every bedroom apartment, right?
Right, that's exactly it. It's an older housing stock, so they were built way back when, and they didn't have to have off-street parking. So now all those people who live in there are trying to park on the streets at the same time.
The comedian Jenny Yang calls it a blood sport in the neighborhood and says that she won't date a guy in Koreatown anymore unless he has a parking spot.
Right, so that's her deal breaker.
That's her. But tell me about, though, the inequalities in this sort of situation, right? I mean, this really does pit working class against wealthier people in a lot of ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I spoke to someone on the neighborhood council who said, you know, you think in other neighborhoods, you know, maybe someone drives home from work, they pull into their garage, they're good to go. But in Koreatown, you have some people who are commuting from very far away, and then they're coming and circling the block for 45 minutes. I had people who tweeted at me after the story ran saying they had circled for an hour and a half. That's time they're not with their family, they're not resting. So yeah, it is, you know, another hardship for people.
There's a viral video about 2 cars that it was like a bullfight, right?
Right.
Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so that's actually the same block where this couple lives, where I set the story. And there was a black car and a silver car, and you know, one car was pulling up to back in, the other nosed in, and then the 2 drivers just sat there for 90 minutes. And a man I spoke with, Juan Matute at UCLA, said that when he saw the video, it was funny, but he also saw it as kind of a civil disobedience. 2 drivers who are just so fed up with the situation that they're like, okay, I'm not gonna move, I'm gonna stay here waiting for this spot.
And speaking of civil disobedience, there are, you know, officers, parking enforcement officers who are circling on, you know, whether it's street sweeping or hours or whatever, and people are playing cat and mouse. Like, they'll see him drive up and they'll go, well, I'll just do a lap around the block and come back. Because all day long.
Exactly. Well, so especially in this neighborhood, Wednesdays and Thursdays, there's 2 hours where they're street sweeping. So, you know, there's vans that will just wait, and then you'll hear the ignition pop on, and you know, someone is coming, pulling up behind them, and then they'll just do a lap. They'll be right back. So sometimes it's 6, 7 times they're just playing that game until it's 10 a.m. and they've secured their spot.
And holding spaces for each other, taking up 2 spaces with 1 car so you can hold it for your friend or your mother or your husband or whatever.
Right, yeah, so I met one man who said he was just so fed up. He's lived on Catalina Street for 11 years, and he said he's seen it getting worse and worse. So he started, you know, tweeting photos and videos of this one particular white van that positioned itself right in between 2 spots, tweeting at the neighborhood council, at the city. at different news organizations saying, hey, this is a bad situation, but let's try to do what we can to make it not as terrible.
Let's talk about solutions. So there are a few that you mentioned, but none of them are really ideal. So a paid permit, again, that sort of pits the working people against the wealthy, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what Juan Matute, who I spoke with at UCLA, mentioned. He said, you could do something like a parking permit district, but there's so many people that live there. In order to make it so that, really everyone could find a spot if they had a permit, you'd have to make the permits really expensive. And that's a politically unpopular, plan, because it's going to be, people who are just moving into the neighborhood who can maybe afford those higher price points, and people who have been in the neighborhood for a long time, lower income people, won't be able to afford that option.
And parking districts where sort of it's almost off-site. It's a little bit out of the neighborhood, but then you're going back. Again, there are people that already Uber from other neighborhoods. If you've got money, it's not such a big deal.
Yeah, all of these things are kind of workaround solutions. You can park at a parking garage, you can Uber home, but those all add up and are also not ideal for people.
There's been a long history, you also talk about, which I thought was pretty funny, of parking wars in all sorts of areas, but this one seems to be really, really chronic and acute. And the future, I have to say, doesn't look great if you live in Koreatown. Explain why.
Right, yeah, one of the experts who I interviewed said, realistically, this is probably just going to get worse, because as Koreatown continues to have more development, more gentrification, there's going to be more people with higher incomes moving in. Higher incomes often translates to more cars. So realistically, it's probably going to keep getting worse in Koreatown.
Well, Marisa, thanks for coming in and explaining. And again, I feel guilty for going and eating in Koreatown so much. Next time, I'm going to Uber or walk.
Yes.
Thank you.
For having me.
To read more from Marisa and keep up with the latest news, log on to latimes.com.